Before you pray for a relationship from God, ask yourself if you've let Him have you. Not the version you present to the world, not the one cloaked in filters, religious language, or controlled vulnerability, but the real you, the wounded one, the weary one, the wandering one. Because the relationships God offers don't begin with the other person. They begin with surrender. You see, God's relationships are not rewards, they are reflections. They reflect the work He's done in the hidden places of your soul. The places you thought didn't matter, your habits, your prayers when no one sees, your willingness to let go of what almost felt right. His relationships aren't based on timing, they're based on transformation. If you haven't become the kind of person who can house holy love, how can you expect to hold it when it comes? God's relationships don't just fall into your lap. They are planted in the soil of your obedience. They grow from sacrifice, not strategy. They bloom in the field of becoming, not begging. He is not trying to tease your desires. He's trying to align them. You say you want someone who will pray with you, stand with you, stay when it's hard. But have you become the kind of person who prays in silence, stands in storms, and stays even when God feels silent? The endurance you're asking for in another must be first born in you. A godly relationship is not two perfect people meeting at the altar of compatibility. It is two surrendered souls, each refined by fire, bowing at the altar of grace. And that fire, it begins with you, with your healing, your becoming, your letting go of counterfeit loves that mimic what God intended but lack His breath. Don't look for someone to fix your loneliness. Fix your identity. Don't chase someone to fill your silence. Fill it with truth. Until you can sit alone with God and know you are already loved, you will keep choosing from desperation, not discernment. When you are ready to give love, not just receive it, when you are led by the Spirit, not by your wounds, when you are able to recognize God in another because you've met Him in yourself, that's when endurance begins. Because divine love does not begin in romance, it begins in reverence. So become the person your prayer is asking for. Be the answered prayer before the question arrives. For the relationship that endures was written not when two met, but when one bowed. And the one is you. Love, true love, is not discovered in the soft light of romance or the pleasant ease of compatibility. It is not first found in the flutter of feelings or the poetry of timing. It begins far deeper than shared interests or synchronized dreams. Love that lasts is not born in comfort but in fire. And that fire does not burn between two people, it begins alone in the secret furnace of the soul. The soul is where every holy thing is tested. The heart, untouched by trial, is often incapable of recognizing what is eternal. In the same way that gold is purified in flame, love must be forged in pain, solitude, and surrender before it is worthy of permanence. The soul is where idols are torn down and illusions exposed. There in the quiet crucible we are stripped of fantasy and readied for reality. And not the reality of what the world calls love, transactional, conditional, timed, and fragile, but the reality of what God Himself defines as love, long-suffering, selfless, rooted in truth, and built for eternity. Before a person is ever ready to love another in a way that mirrors the divine, they must allow the divine to first burn away what is false within them. This is why many seek love but cannot hold it. They approach it as a gift, not a calling, as a feeling, not a formation. But God's kind of love is a calling that costs. It demands death to self, surrender of ego, and the slow, painful breaking of all the things within us that want to be served rather than to serve. In the furnace of the soul, you will be asked to let go of the fairy tales you wrote in your mind. You'll be invited to release your timeline, your entitlement, your craving for affection without cost. And in return, God will give you something far more valuable: capacity. The capacity to carry love with strength, to endure with dignity, to remain when it's hard. Because what is forged in fire does not break in wind. It stands, it holds, it remembers. We often imagine that we are ready for a holy relationship simply because we long for one. But longing is not preparation. Pain is. Waiting is. Silence is. These are the tools God uses in the furnace. He doesn't hand you love until he knows you've been made able to handle its weight. Because love is not always sweet, it is heavy. It asks much. It reveals you. And the version of you that has not walked through the furnace will not know what to do with it. There, in that soul fire, God begins his slow work. He begins to peel away the layers of self-protection, performance, and pride. He confronts your fears of abandonment, of inadequacy, of not being chosen, and he speaks into them with his own choosing. He teaches you that love is not found in being seen by another, but in being known by him. Until that truth burns into your bones, you will continue to search for people to fill what only fire can refine. And that fire doesn't just purify you for someone else, it prepares you for yourself. Because before you can love another with wholeness, you must first become whole. And wholeness is not a state of perfection. It is a state of surrender. It is the place where you stop performing and start becoming, where you stop trying to impress and start to inhabit the truth of who you are in God. There is a love that can weather betrayal, a love that doesn't run when feelings fade, a love that holds firm through storms, loss, change, and years. But such a love does not come cheaply. It is not available to those who only seek affection. It is entrusted to those who have been shaped for it. So if you find yourself in a season where you are alone, misunderstood, or burning with questions about when and how and with whom, do not despise the furnace. For it is there that God does his most eternal work. He is not punishing you. He is preparing you. He is forming in you the kind of heart that will not run, the kind of soul that will not settle, and the kind of love that will not break. For love that lasts does not begin when you meet them. It begins when you meet yourself in the fire. It is a strange thing that so many long to be loved well, yet so few are willing to become the kind of person who can love well. We yearn to be understood, chosen, and pursued with depth and dignity, yet when the time comes to reflect such love, our hands come up empty, our hearts unfamiliar with the substance of what we demanded. The truth, as piercing as it is liberating, is this: you cannot give what you have refused to become. You may speak of love. You may quote verses and repeat sentiments lifted from songs or sermons. You may even feel deeply, ache honestly, and dream sincerely, but none of these amount to becoming. To become is to embody, to integrate, to live in the marrow what others only wear on the surface. It is not enough to desire loyalty, you must become loyal. Not enough to crave honesty, you must practice it when it costs you. Not enough to want patience, you must be stretched by waiting and choose not to curse the process. God does not give lasting things to people who only want momentary relief. He entrusts the holy to those who have been prepared to hold it. And to be prepared is to be transformed, not simply instructed, but reshaped. Becoming is not a romantic pursuit, it is a crucifixion. It is the unmaking of what is shallow in us, the confronting of what is hidden, the dying of what is selfish. And no one can give the kind of love that endures unless they have first surrendered to that undoing. People pray for someone who will love with gentleness, truth, integrity, and spiritual vision. But have they themselves become that person? Have they cultivated patience in their own hearts, or are they simply waiting for someone patient to handle their emotional immaturity? Have they chosen forgiveness when wronged, or are they asking for a person who will forgive while they continue to wound? Have they allowed the Spirit to confront their pride, or are they hoping for someone humble enough to submit to their ego? You cannot give protection while still operating in fear. You cannot offer stability while your soul is a shifting shoreline. You cannot offer sacrificial love while still bowing at the altar of your own convenience. This is why relationships that begin in passion so often end in ashes, because they are fueled by desire rather than character. They begin with wanting, not with being. The love that lasts must come from a place that has been built, not wished for. It must be drawn from the deep well of a life rooted in God, disciplined in grace, trained in surrender. You do not stumble into this kind of becoming. You walk toward it slowly, sometimes limping, often alone, always accompanied by the quiet voice of the one who sees not who you pretend to be, but who you are being shaped into. To become means letting go of timelines and comparisons. It means surrendering your image, your curated charm, your manipulative need to be liked or chosen. It means becoming real, even when real is raw and awkward. It means facing the parts of yourself that sabotage connection and choosing again and again to be healed instead of defended. You cannot give faithful love while remaining unfaithful to your own inner work. So many enter into relationships asking to be completed, not realizing that this desire itself is a sign of incompletion. Only what is whole can offer love that heals. Not perfection, but wholeness, a soul anchored in God, not needing to be filled by another, but ready to overflow into them. This kind of person gives not from desperation, but from discernment, not from scarcity, but from strength. And that strength is not loud. It is not controlling. It is not proud. It is quiet, resilient, deeply rooted in grace. The tragedy is not that people can't find love. It is that they seek it before they've become it. They want the fruit without planting the seed. But God is not mocked. Love, like anything eternal, must be cultivated. And if you are not willing to become love in your character, you will only reenact love in your performance. It will look right and feel right for a while, but in the day of testing, it will not hold. To give something holy, you must first be made holy. To give something lasting, you must first endure something lasting. To love in a way that brings life, you must have allowed life to first reshape you. Because you cannot give what you've refused to become. There is a great lie that lives quietly in the background of our age. It whispers that love is luck, that connection is chance, and that finding your person is a romantic accident, fortunate if it happens, but ultimately random. This is the theology of the world: love as coincidence, commitment as preference, soulmates as gamble. But the heart formed by the Spirit knows differently. Heaven is not careless with the binding of souls. God does not weave threads of eternity with the hands of fate. He moves with intention, with foreknowledge, and with holy precision. To believe that souls are matched by accident is to reduce the eternal to the emotional and the sacred to the sentimental. God does not deal in accidents. He deals in alignment. There is nothing accidental about two souls who have been prepared in separate seasons, refined by fire, deepened in solitude, and called into union by the same voice that once called light out of darkness. The meeting may seem sudden to the human eye, but the preparation has been long in motion. Heaven writes stories not in haste, but in hiddenness. Before two souls are ever joined in the physical realm, their preparation is underway in the spiritual. The delays are not denials, the silence is not neglect, and the loneliness is not wasted. God is not merely watching your life unfold, He is authoring it. And like any author, He introduces characters only when the narrative demands them, when the arc has matured, when the soul is finally able to hold what it once would have only mishandled. We often assume that we are waiting for a person when in truth we are being prepared to meet ourselves as God sees us. And only when we have begun to see ourselves rightly through the eyes of the one who formed us can we begin to recognize the person who has been formed in parallel. The meeting of souls is not just a romantic moment, it is the convergence of two journeys orchestrated by a sovereign hand, often unseen and always on time. What the world calls chemistry, heaven calls confirmation. The deep recognition, the uncanny timing, the peace beneath the mystery, these are not romantic illusions. These are evidences of divine choreography. The heart that has been trained to listen will know the difference between a distraction and a destiny. The one who has walked with God in the silence will hear Him clearly in the sacred meeting. For it is not just about who they are, it is about what God is doing in and through the union. Souls matched by heaven are not matched for mere comfort. They are paired for purpose. There is always a calling beneath the connection. You are not brought together simply to feel safe, but to carry something eternal together, something neither could carry alone. A true God-ordained relationship is not just companionship, it is commission. You are sent into one another's lives not to complete each other, but to unleash what God has already planted. This is why the timing matters. Premature connection creates pressure. If God brought someone too soon, you would mistake them for the answer rather than the assignment. The delay is not cruelty, it is mercy, for he knows what you must become before you can steward what he is bringing. And he knows what the other person must go through to be ready for you. Heaven is never rushed, though our prayers may be frantic. God is not moved by panic, he is moved by purpose. To wait for heaven's match is not to wait in passivity. It is to labor in the quiet, to obey in the dark, to be faithful in the unseen places. The soul that is truly waiting on God is not frozen, it is being formed. There are gifts being cultivated in your character now that will become answers to someone else's prayer later. The healing you are fighting for will be the safety they will one day rest in. The discernment you are growing will be the clarity they need when storms come. You are not becoming perfect, you are becoming ready. There will be moments where doubt whispers that you've missed it, that you're late, that your story is behind. But heaven does not operate on earthly clocks, it moves on eternal alignment. When God is ready to introduce two of his own to each other, nothing will hinder the connection, not distance, not time, not circumstance. The meeting will feel inevitable, not because it was luck, but because your whole life will have prepared you to recognize it. And not just to recognize it, but to receive it, carry it, and protect what God himself has matched. There is a sacred paradox at the heart of every lasting God-authored relationship. It is not built on neediness, but neither is it void of desire. True love flourishes not in the vacuum of desperation, but in the deliberate space of wholeness. You must come to the threshold of another's heart, not with trembling hands begging to be completed, but with open hands choosing to share the abundance of what you've become. That is the ground where divine love takes root, when two people stand whole enough not to need and yet humble enough to still choose. Wholeness is not about self-sufficiency in the worldly sense. It does not mean you have no longing, no hunger, or no ache for companionship. It means that your identity is no longer a fragile shell propped up by the presence or absence of another human being. It means your sense of worth is no longer on leash to someone else's attention. It means that you have found in God the well that does not run dry, and you have drunk deeply enough to know that even if no one ever joins you, you are still full. You cannot carry another person's heart well if your own is leaking. And you cannot pour into a sacred union if you are secretly hoping it will heal wounds you've never brought before the healer. Many people rush into love hoping to escape themselves, only to find that love, real love, has a way of revealing what we've tried to hide. That's why relationships rooted in need often collapse under the pressure of becoming what they were never meant to be: therapy, validation, escape, distraction, or identity. God does not call us to love out of lack, but out of overflow. That overflow comes only when we have first met him in the silence of our solitude, when we have wrestled with our own fears and insecurities long enough to know that we are no longer waiting for someone to fix us. We are waiting because we are being formed, and the formation is not for the person we hope to meet, it is for the person we are called to become, with or without them. Only when you are no longer driven by need can you choose in freedom. And freedom is the essence of love. Need coerces, wholeness chooses. The one who needs cannot love without expectation, cannot stay without condition, cannot give without tallying. But the one who is whole does not love to be filled, they love because they are full. And in their fullness they choose. They choose to give, to remain, to build, not because they must, but because they can. Choosing while whole is more sacred than loving while needy. It is an act of courage to say, I do not need you to complete me, but I see you, and I choose to walk with you. It is a testament to God's faithfulness in your life that you no longer enter relationships to be rescued, but to reflect his glory. It is a holy thing to arrive at love, not as a refugee from your own emptiness, but as a vessel ready to pour. Wholeness is not perfection. It is not the absence of struggle or weakness. It is the presence of truth. It is the knowledge of who you are in Christ and the unshakable confidence that your value is not on the auction block of human approval. It is the rest that comes from having allowed God to rewrite your story where others wounded it. And from that place, love becomes a choice, not a compulsion, not an escape, not a substitute, but a sacred offering. You must learn to walk with God long enough to know what it feels like to stand on your own. Not in pride, but in peace. To know that loneliness has not broken you, but refined you. To know that silence has not swallowed you, but deepened you. And from that deep place, when another soul appears not to fix you, not to save you, but to walk beside you, you will be able to recognize them not as your missing piece, but as a partner to your purpose. When love is born from wholeness, it is not needy but nourishing. It doesn't suffocate, it strengthens. It does not demand constant reassurance, because both hearts are anchored in a greater love, one that was known long before the other person arrived. And in that knowledge, you choose not because you're empty, but because you're full enough to give, strong enough to stay, and healed enough to love. Fear of losing yourself in the process. The heart was created to love, but not randomly and not without order. It was designed with a divine architecture at its center, one throne. And that throne was never meant for a partner, a dream, a calling, or even the deepest human affection. It was made for God and God alone. When we forget this sacred order, when we misplace the weight of our devotion, we begin to turn people into gods and love into idolatry. If God is not our first love, every other will slowly become an idol. There is a hunger in the soul that nothing in this world can satisfy, though many will try. The warmth of human closeness, the thrill of romance, the comfort of emotional security, these are beautiful gifts, but cruel gods. They can fill moments, but not eternity. They can stir the heart, but not steady it. They can excite the mind, but not sanctify the soul. When the love of God is not enthroned in our affections, we begin asking others to carry a weight their shoulders were never meant to bear. The tragedy is subtle. It rarely begins with open rebellion. It begins with good desires misplaced. A longing for connection becomes an obsession for affirmation. A hope for marriage becomes an altar of self-worth. A desire to be seen becomes a demand to be worshipped. The person becomes the source. The relationship becomes the savior. And slowly, gently, dangerously, we slip into worship without realizing we've begun. People don't set out to build idols out of love. They do it because they forget that love, like everything else, must be submitted to the giver. God never intended to take the place of our relationships. He intended to take first place within them. When He is first, love is purified. When He is first, the human becomes human again, not a God, not a cure measuring stick, but a companion in the journey of grace. Idolatry always distorts what it touches. It turns affection into anxiety. It twists longing into dependency. It shifts the voice of love into the voice of fear. Suddenly, your peace rises and falls with their attention. Your joy is tethered to their validation. Your worth is now negotiated by someone else's presence or absence. This is not love, it is bondage. And the only cure is to return to the one who never created you to be consumed by another person's approval. To love rightly is to love in order. Not to diminish others, but to exalt God to His rightful place. Until He is our first love, our deepest well, our true north, every other relationship will suffer under the weight of misplaced worship. You cannot love someone well when you need them to be your God. You will either cling too tightly or crush them under the pressure of your expectation. You will not give, you will demand. You will not serve, you will strive, because the throne of your heart is already occupied by a counterfeit Savior. When God is first, the soul breathes. It no longer needs to chase love to feel seen. It no longer begs for attention to feel alive. It no longer manipulates to feel secure. It is settled, anchored, whole. And from that wholeness, love can flow not as idolatry, but as worship. Not as dependency, but as mutual honor. Not as frantic reaching, but as peaceful offering. The soul is no longer starved, it is satisfied. And a satisfied soul does not worship love, it gives it freely without fear of losing itself. First love is not simply about affection, it is about authority. Who defines you? Who holds your future? Who steadies your steps when the world shakes? If your partner, your dream, or even your own feelings occupy that place, you will always be shaken. You will always live with the fear of loss because your God can leave you. But when God is your first love, your unshakable center, no storm can undo you. You were not created to be undone by another person's presence or absence. You were created to be sustained by the eternal. That's why your soul cannot rest until it returns to the one who made it. That's why even the most beautiful relationships feel fragile when God is absent. That's why in every season of love, longing, waiting, or heartbreak, the invitation is always the same: return to your first love. The one who saw you first, named you first, chose you first, loved you first. Because when he is first, everything else falls into its rightful place. But when he is second, everything else becomes a counterfeit God. And no heart can survive the weight of worshipping what it was only meant to hold gently, humbly, and in the light of the one who defines all love. There are words this world has forgotten how to speak. Words forged not in speed, but in stillness, not in noise, but in silence. Endurance is one of them. It is no longer fashionable in a culture of urgency where everything is judged by how fast it can be obtained, how quickly it can feel good, and how effortlessly it can serve us. But heaven still speaks this word fluently, for endurance is not the language of the hurried, it is the language of the eternal. Endurance is not passive, it is not merely the ability to survive suffering. It is not clenched fists and gritted teeth in the dark. Endurance is sacred defiance. It is the soul's decision to remain when everything in the world screams to run. It is the quiet loyalty that stays rooted when the winds of change, doubt, fear, or failure rise. It is what love looks like when feelings fall silent and faith becomes the only compass. There is a reason eternity values endurance, because nothing eternal can be built in haste. God himself writes in long sentences over long seasons. He does not rush what he loves. And anything fashioned by his hands will carry the same fingerprints marked by patience, formed by time, sealed with perseverance. If it is of God, it will not demand instant gratification. It will ask for endurance. Because only what is tested can be trusted. Only what has stood long enough can be called strong enough to last. This is why the relationships, callings, and commitments shaped by the Spirit often move slowly. Not because God is withholding, but because he is preparing. Not because the blessing is delayed, but because you are being built to hold it. If your soul has not yet learned the rhythm of endurance, you will misinterpret the slowness of God as absence. You will believe the pause is punishment. But endurance trains the heart to see delay as design, not denial. Endurance refines the soul not by shielding it from pain, but by walking it through the fire until it learns not to be consumed. You are not called to escape every storm, but to remain steadfast in the midst of it. You are not asked to feel strong, you are asked to stand anyway. This is the kind of strength the eternal understands. Not the loud strength of control, but the quiet strength of commitment. Not the strength that demands a reward, but the strength that honors the process. Heaven is not impressed by intensity, it honors consistency. Anyone can burn bright for a moment. Anyone can promise forever when they're filled with emotion and energy. But endurance asks for something more than moments, it asks for years. It asks for loyalty when nothing is changing. It asks for trust when the outcome is unclear. It asks for obedience when the cost is high and the applause is gone. The eternal is not built by the impressive, it is built by the faithful. Endurance is also the secret language of love. Not romantic love as the world defines it, passion without responsibility, affection without sacrifice, but the kind of love that reflects the eternal nature of God. The love that shows up at the hospital bed. The love that chooses to stay when communication is hard and conflict is deep. The love that keeps praying, keeps forgiving, keeps choosing even when the fire has cooled and the feelings have fled. That kind of love cannot be manufactured. It must be formed slowly in the furnace of time, in the sanctuary of surrender. The eternal never fears waiting. It does not wither under long stretches of silence. It does not retreat in the face of hardship. The eternal speaks the language of endurance because that is the language of heaven's own heart. The God who waited generations to fulfill a promise, the God who bore the weight of sin on a cross, the God who is patient with every wandering soul, he speaks in endurance. And to walk with him, to reflect his love, is to learn to speak that language too. Endurance may not be loud, but it is mighty. It may not be praised, but it is precious. It may not be glamorous, but it is godly. It is the daily yes to God when nothing makes sense, the gentle return to truth when emotions falter, the firm hand that keeps building when no one notices, the quiet faith that keeps believing when hope seems distant. The eternal is not shouted into being, it is whispered through 1,000 small choices, 1,000 steady steps, 1,000 silent refusals to quit when the world says it would be easier to walk away. Because endurance has never been the language of ease, it has always been the language of eternity.